Ooh.
Steph
Yeah,
Curry's
Steph
three.
Curry. Okay.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
somebody in the chat mentioned, I think when we were having the LeBron discussion, and it was like peak for peak, is Steph more scheme proof than LeBron? And I think the answer is yes. I think Steph is more scheme proof than Bron, for the simple fact being like there's going to be like a level of of hope, like you said. Like it's not saying Bron is like you can scheme for Bron or whatever, especially his peak. But like there is a level of hope or whatever. Like, oh, we're gonna go under the screen and just hope they miss the shot. And to Mars's point, like, yeah, you'll probably still win, but there's somewhat of an option available to you with LeBron. I would argue that peak Steph, there really isn't an option because Steph is the best mover without the ball ever. And they literally have orchestrated a decade plus long offense around Steph's movement and you being scared to death of Steph moving without the ball. And then that just leverages it to him being the best shooter of all time. He's a all-time great playmaker. The fact that he can operate a pick and roll and, get to the floor, get to the rim. He's a really, really good finisher at the rim. Insane cutter. And sure, I think he's a somewhat product of the system that was built in Golden State, but he is the system in Golden State. And he's not this isolation hunter that some of the other guys are, but he's not bad. He's still a very, very good isolation scorer. And then the fact that he is the catalyst of what's been a decade long, successful offensive system built around the fact that he's the greatest 3-point shooter of all time. He's the greatest off-ball mover of all time, and he's an all-time great playmaker.
So I think it's time to have this conversation because I think Mars knows what I'm talking about. I had Steph at number one.
Okay.
I had Steph at number one. And when I look at Steph, man, his box scores will say like 27 and 6. But when I watch Steph, is like there's no way he's not getting like 12 assists a night. Because there's countless times on the floor where Steph is like, look, there's 4 guys on the opposing team that are paying attention to me. This guy's going to cut and they're all going to be looking at me. That's Steph's assist. Or like in game 1 of the 2017 NBA Finals, Kevin Durant gets back-to-back untouched, unpicked up transition points because Steph Curry is running right next to him and there's 2 people collapsing on Steph Curry. Those are Steph's assists. Being able to constantly get switches and pick and roll, being able to have the entire defense worried about what you're doing on ball, and it won't matter if Steph doesn't make a shot for 2 weeks straight. They're going to guard him like he just made 40 straight. Like that's insane. That's insane. They're going to create going to create easy offense by just moving off screens and being on the floor. Steph being on the floor is constantly going to make easy drives, easy cuts, easy finishes around the rim. Throughout that peak of Steph Curry's career, the Golden State Warriors led the league in assisted shots at the rim. They led it every single season. And number 2 was actually Cleveland too. So shout out to LeBron. But I think Steph just being able to create shots for others the way he was able to, and just having that I can shoot better than anybody else can do anything in basketball. And in the time where that was starting to rise up and that was starting to be extremely dangerous, I think it makes Steph have the greatest offensive peak in NBA history because offense just became seamless. Getting switches, playing in transition, getting guys open, and it all comes with just him being on the floor. He didn't have to do much to generate great offense.
Yeah, I think the argument against Steph would be that he can't physically impose himself on an offense like the other 4 guys we all have in this tier. I think one guy we haven't talked about yet is just huge. So we'll talk about that.
Bill Russell?
One guy's just huge. He's a big old body, so he's going to physically impose himself. One guy had the best first step ever. The other guy was huge and ridiculously fast in a straight line. Steph didn't have that singular
athletic trait
or physical trait that he could just impose himself. And so I think you do run into a series like Houston where they're switching everything and he's not the same type of mismatch, or like Cleveland in the 16 finals, just bumping him every time he runs around off ball, playing super physical and taking him out of his comfort zone. Granted, I'm pretty sure he was hurt in that series and that kind of gets overlooked, but I think that would be the one argument against Steph. The problem is nobody comes even remotely close to causing the amount of panic on a defense that Steph did, because a 40% 3-point shot is 1.2 points per possession. And that is a shot he can get to the moment he steps across the logo. And it is Off ball, he's shooting like 46% on catch and shoot threes. He's shooting like 43% on pull up threes. He's shooting like 42% on contested threes. Wide open threes, I think from that 3-year stretch, he was like 50% on wide open threes. So leaving Steph open is like giving up a 75% shot at the rim. So the amount of panic that comes with Steph Curry running around, coming around screens, coming off of a pick and roll is just unlike anything, even to this day. Like right now, unlike anything we've ever seen. And I think what gets somewhat overlooked is that as times passed, we forget how different the league was then and how rosters were constructed. Teams were starting 2 7-footers. The power forwards were also drop bigs. So now you have a guy who, think about what Steph's doing right now, and imagine that if teams had 2 slow-footed 7-footers that were getting pulled into every action. And it's like now my offense has an advantage every single possession. If you put 2 on the ball, Draymond's playing 4 on 3, and he's the best short roll player before Jokic. And it's just like every single possession, the team has an advantage. So like you said, you look at Steph 27 and 6, and it's probably on hyper efficiency too. Let's talk about the fact that in the 2016 season, he was 13% ahead of league average true shooting. Shooting 45% from 3 on 11 attempts a game. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But Steph caused a level of panic that we've never seen. We've never seen, and you talked about it, Sean. The way he balanced that with like elite change of direction to attack bigs in space, get to the rim, like touch on layups only rivaled by really Kyrie from small guards. Just ridiculous touch. Had the floater, had the mid-range pull-up. He was shooting like 47% from the mid-range during those years. Yeah, I just think he broke the game. I just think he broke the game in a time where defenses did not know how to defend that. And I think if you took like 2016 Steph and put him in the league right now, I think, oh yeah, Tony Parker. Someone just said Tony Parker. That's another guy. That's another guard with all-time touch. I forgot about him. If you took 2016 Steph and just dropped him in the league right now, I don't think I would have him as my GOAT offensive player because I think teams are better equipped to defend that now. But if we're going relative to that time, nobody knew how to defend that. It was such a game breaker. And my selling point on Steph over these other 3 guys is that he unlocked roster construction in a way we've never seen. It is unfathomable that the 2022 Celtics were like a top 5 defense of the 21st century. They were like a top 5. They were just damn near flawless across the board, 1 through 5. And they shut down KD in the Nets. They just blitzed the East with their defense. They get into the finals. The Warriors are starting Draymond Green and Kevon Looney together in 2022 against the best defense, and they cannot get a stop. They can't get a stop. They try drop coverage. Steph goes for like 45 in one of those games. They try blitzing, and they're getting a layup every possession. It's just, it's absurd. And that's not even peak Steph. That's not even, it's absurd. It's absurd. Steph was my number 1. I actually had Jokic number 1 before we started recording. And then I was like selling myself while we're talking about it. I'm like, Steph just broke the game. He just broke the game of basketball.
That's what I'm telling you. I was up till 3 a.m. last night. And I'm just looking. I'm like,
dedication right there.
I can make the argument. So I was like, you know what? Twitter sleep. Let me just get this out because I probably may not be able to do this on the pod. But I'm like, you know what? Let's just bring it to the pod. Why not? I'm really high on Steph.
All of you guys are. I mean, I think I'm quite high on Steph. Maybe not as high as you guys, but I think I'm quite high. I guess I'll be the bad guy. The reason I hesitate with Steph is I think the point about roster construction I do think is a great point. Is very, especially in today's game, the fact that the Warriors have been employing and starting multiple non-shooters for multiple years now. And Steph is still creating elite offense when he's on the floor is a testament to the fact that he does things to defenses and makes players viable that wouldn't be viable elsewhere. I agree with that. I think that's a great point about Steph. And the fact that 2016 Steph was so ahead of his time in the curve, I agree with that. And that's my biggest selling point with Steph. And I do think he might be the greatest regular season offensive player ever. But I do think in the postseason, I do think there were limitations. I do think switching defenses slowed him down and the Warriors down a lot. I would go to Houston as an example of that. I do think Kevin Durant kind of broke that because he was the switch solve. But Steph himself, I don't think was. I also think the Warriors didn't have the best offensive results in the postseason, as maybe is what people would expect. More often than not, they were a better defensive team than an offensive team. Shout out to Draymond Green. So I think that probably holds Steph back somewhat, but then you also factor in the roster construction. I think obviously the best shooter ever, and what he did to defenses was insane. But I do think not the counter, but the way to handle that version of Steph, it sounds simple, was quite simply communication. The reason Steph broke defenses was because he forced a lot of miscommunication. But if a team is fully locked in and fully engaged and communicating well, you can slow him down. The Rockets slowed him down twice, 2018 and 2019. One of them, he was coming off a hand injury. So, like, you can maybe be like, that might be part of it. But 2018, they slowed him down because they were just on a string and engaged. And they didn't have the breakdowns that the Cavs had in the finals, for example, that John D alluded to. Kevin Durant getting those wide open layups in transition is a testament to Steph. But that happened not because they were more worried about Steph than KD, but because Steph caused the miscommunication that led to them giving up a dunk. Does that make sense? Like, no one in their right mind is saying, I'm going to guard this Steph 3 over a Kevin Durant going to the rim for a dunk. But because everyone's so worried about Steph and they miscommunicated, I think it was J.R. Smith and it might have been LeBron.
Yeah,
Both of them went to Steph because they didn't tell the other one to stay with KD. That's what Steph does. He scrambles your defense. But if you're engaged and you're communicating, you can.
But I think that's the argument for Steph, though, because I think what you're saying makes sense. But because they're in such a panic, it's like they go into fight or flight. It's like, oh my God, Steph's open. We got to go get him. And then 3 people run through him, and then you get a layup. And I just think that's an argument for Steph because he did it to the best and smartest defenders. Like Pelicans, Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis, 2 of the smartest defenders in the league, just absolutely helpless the moment he crosses half court. And it's just like, I just think even Houston, I guess Houston changed a lot once they got D'Antoni and got all those defenders, but he absolutely blitzed them in 2015.
2015
he obliterated them in 2015. He shot 49% from 3 in that series.
He only shot like 80% from the free throw line, so he's
also like the Spurs. Every time they played the Spurs, like he has a series against the Spurs where he averaged like 35 points on 70% true shooting.
2017,
I think so. And you look at the Spurs, that's a Greg Popovich coach team with a bunch of super smart defenders. And I just think like it's the panic. It's the panic he causes. Like you said, the miscommunications happen. Because when you're in fight or flight and you see Steph on a 3-point line with nobody on him, you're not thinking to communicate. You're thinking, I need to get to that guy before he shoots the ball. And then he has, I think actually Ben Taylor from Thinking Basketball tracked it in his peak Steph video. From catching the ball to releasing the shot, I think it was 0.5 seconds. So it's like you can't let him catch the ball or the shot's up.
Yeah, I also think this is obvious. There's a level of volatility that comes with any 3-point shooter, even Steph Curry. Yeah. And he was liable to have, like, at least once every series, the game where he goes 1 for 9 from 3 and he scores like 14 points. That, I think the floor was lower with him from a points per game standard, not like the impact, the intangible stuff. That stuff was pretty much always there in most series. But I do think there was a level of he's gonna have a bad shooting. Like even in the 2022 finals, that game 5, when they started blitzing him, he shot like 0 for 9 from 3 that game. Now they obviously still won. I think their offense was actually better that game because they unlocked the 4-on-3 stuff. Or the 2018 finals game 3, that game was just bad. Like we can call it a bad game. He's more susceptible to those types of games. Oh, absolutely.
And you know what? You know what? On that Steph point, I actually think it's an absolute travesty that we never got to see him in the 2021 playoffs because I think that's the version of Steph that had the least amount of volatility. I think that version of Steph was just so consistent because of the added strength. Like, I really wish we got to see.
If you don't do relative to era, I think 2021 Steph is the best he was. Like, if you're not,
or even just as a scorer, like as a complete scorer, I think that is the best he's ever been as well.
Yeah. If you're like 2016 to me is the best Steph because, like, as you said, like we're running two bigs who can't move. Like he's breaking.
Yeah, we got Andre.
But if you aren't adjusting for error, like you aren't doing relative to error, I do think 2021 is his most complete self offensively. I do think the isolation game leveled up. I do think the on-ball game in general leveled up. And I think the shooting ability, just off the fact that he was seeing the more modern coverages to what he was doing and still being that efficient, that elite. And then that month for April, whatever he was doing was just superhuman. I do think that might be the best he ever was, not relative to error. But I do think there was just, and I also think one thing that limited Steph is the rim finishing, the interior scoring in the postseason did regress routinely. I was looking at some numbers here. Now, some of it you can say is 2016 injuries. But in the finals, 48% of the rim. In the conference finals, 45% of the rim. In 2017, in round one, 41% of the rim. In the finals in 2018, 58% of the rim. Like, that's not great. It's not ideal. I'll say that. 56% in the second round in 2019. Like, questionable rim finishing numbers.
Yeah.
Like, you're not getting the easy ones. He also has a questionable whistle, so he doesn't get a lot of free throws. Makes him at like 90%. So still valuable that he's getting like 4.5 points a game on that. So like I do think when you're susceptible to the level of volatility that Steph is due to the high volume threes, and you struggle around the rim in certain series and matchups, and you're not getting to the free throw line a whole bunch, and you are a limited passer with very questionable decision making, I think that's fair to say Steph is liable to make some bad decisions.
Yeah.
That I would probably have Steph at 4. I'd probably have Steph at 4, maybe 3.
I think it's fair. Like I said, I think my 1 through 5 is like you could flip them any order. I went with Steph at 1.
I definitely see the argument for Steph at 1, especially like I said, I think he's the best regular season offensive player ever. But I think now I'm talking myself into it. I think I'd probably have Steph at 3.
But also one thing with Steph too that I think is not underrated. None of us have brought it up is along with the other guy we're going to get to next, probably the easiest player ever to fit with any archetype of player.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of gets like the 2016 Warriors. A lot of those teams didn't have a lot of shooting threats. Like he was the spacing. Him and Clay were the spacing. Like he'd be in lineups with Iggy, Draymond, and Bogut, and it's like
2016 Draymond was the sniper.
Well, I was gonna say Draymond was a capable shooter at that time, but still defenses weren't like scrambling to close out on Draymond.
I think, yeah. I really don't know what I'm gonna be honest. I really don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm looking at, I've got all of you guys' lists filled out, and then I'm looking at whatever I've got. Like it's not. I've got 10, 9, and 8, and everything else is I'm not sold on it. So we'll get to that anyway. But there's one player left to discuss, and it is Sean. I think you're number 1. So go ahead and talk to us about Nikola Jokic. I'm assuming that's your number 1. I don't want to.
Wait, no, I thought it was Shea.
Yeah, I don't want to jump the gun.
I thought it was Luka. You know, he did drop 30 today, I think.
Hey.
So I shouldn't have jumped the gun. If you have Jerry Stackhouse, go ahead. Just whoever.
Yeah, it's actually Mario Chalmers at number 1.